Well, thanks for joining me for the next 5 minutes or so. This is our Take 5 segment where we take 5 minutes out of your day. Usually I record this on a Friday morning. You may get it on Friday evening or Saturday morning, whenever you do. We take 5 minutes out of your day and give you a bit of a preview so that you can be thinking about what we're going to be discussing on Sunday. So we'd love to see you in person, obviously, at 10 o'clock at State Road or 1895 State Road 44 here in Martinsville. If not, you're able to do that in person, obviously you can follow us on our YouTube channel, Faith Church Martinsville, or get there through our Facebook page. Well, last night was a big night for many of us, a night that many people that I know have been looking forward to for quite a while. It was the NFL draft, right? So some people, they have their Super Bowl parties, but right next to their Super Bowl parties is right up there is like the draft party, because there's nothing more exciting than potential. You know, what could possibly happen if my favorite team would draft this particular player, or if they take their draft stock and they trade away picks for more picks, right? And so every year there's this heightened, anticipation of what this next year's potential. And all the GM goals, right, of all these various teams, their goal is to make the best team possible. They want to compete. They want to make sure that their team that they put on the field is the best team possible that they can possibly have, whether that's trading a top pick for more picks, or whether that's trading that particular person that you are just sure that is going to make your team jump to that next level, that you can place the most possibly best team that you possibly can, on the field next year. Well, I don't know if you're like me, but oftentimes when I watch TV anymore, I like to multitask. And so I was actually flipping back and forth from the draft with a movie that I actually rented last night. And I wanted to see this movie while I was in the theaters. It didn't happen, but maybe you have seen this. But if not, I encourage you to rent it. It's called the Jesus Revolution. It's a true story of sort of the Jesus movement that started out really in California in the late 60s, early 70s, sort of the hippie culture. It was a very interesting piece of history. And like any movement, spiritual movement, there's things of God and there's things of man there. There's good and bad with all that movement. All that good stuff obviously comes from the Lord. All the bad stuff obviously comes from man. And if you're not familiar with it, it's basically a true story of a man by the name of Chuck Smith who pastored a church and opened his doors to kind of Jesus people, hippies who are wanting to find who this Jesus is. And they came to the Lord, and his church looked very different within a very short, amount of time. And so there's a number of people who were at his church that were upset. What are we doing? Our church doesn't look like this. And there's a lot of debate about what the church should look like and all that. So it's just kind of a fascinating look into what is the church supposed to be? What makes a good church? And the reason why I share that is not to give you a little insight of the two things that I was watching last night on Thursday night, but we're going to be walking through really 5 verses in chapter 4 of the book of Philippians. We've been on this teaching series called Living from the Heart for a number of months now. We're on the final chapter. We're on the home stretch, right? And we're going to be looking at 5 verses right off the top of this chapter 4, where Paul talks about what makes a good church, what makes a healthy church, a healthy DNA, right? And I've often wondered this, what does God want his church to look like? And I oftentimes find myself going to the book of Revelation, chapter 2 and chapter 3, where Jesus really takes 7 literal churches and sort of gives them a bit of a report card or evaluation of how they are doing. And what I find with that is oftentimes that the churches that you would expect, as you look at the history and all that kind of stuff, that you'd expect to get high marks, sometimes get the low marks. And then the churches that you would expect would get the low marks, sometimes they are the ones who get the high marks. And it comes to my understanding, my conclusion that God just sees differently than we do. And obviously God's clarity is much better than our clarity when it comes to his church and what his church desires, what he desires for his bride, what he desires for the body of believers that gather in his name. And so we're going to look at 5 verses right off the top of chapter 4 in Philippians as we turn the page in this final chapter, as we hit the home stretch in this series that we've been on for a while. And we're going to look at sort of what makes a healthy church as Paul describes it here. So we hope that you'll join us in person. If not, go to our YouTube page. God bless. Have a great remainder of your day.